we will call to order the regular meeting of the City of Helotes Planning and Zoning Commission for October 2nd. It is 7 p.m. I'd ask the commission secretary to call the roll, please.
Greg Michelle.
Here.
Jason Whitman.
Here.
Ron Haza. Jeff Wade. Mario Rios.
Here.
Joe Edmond. Richard Hawk.
Here.
Mike McLaughlin.
Here.
Rick Schroeder, city administrator, and Alex Blue from council with us. We'll move to citizens to be heard, which there are none this evening. So our next item is the liaison report. This is a new item that Alex and I had talked about as a opportunity for him to come back to us on particular recent items that this body had acted on and tell us how the discussion went at council, offer any feedback, and just basically update us on them. So there are three for this time, so turn it over to Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that's a good introduction. I realize that sometimes the actions that the commission takes may or may not stay the same, and the discussion might be slightly different. And there was a lot of conversation in the past about, well, we don't know what council might be thinking or doing, and therefore, and so I thought maybe, I discussed this with the chairman and said, maybe I can come back at the end of the meetings and say, here's what you sent to council, and here was the discussion and the outcome. And that might at least give you some information, because sometimes there's that, like, whatever happened to that? So unfortunately, this agenda item is actually very simple for you tonight, or fortunately, because you might have a short meeting. As you recall, at your last commission meeting, you allowed the zoning of the pre-development, the property there, the 57 acres off of Galm Road that was purchased and annexed by the city, adjacent to the other property, the 100 and some acres that was next to it. You did your zoning work and recommended residential 1. City council did exactly the same thing because that's what was being asked. So that's the end result there. The variance for the request for a FedEx office sign on the outside of Walmart, City Council took the exact same action that Planning and Zoning did, granting the variances necessary to allow them to have the sign exactly as you forwarded to Council. And the request for a master sign plan for the Helotes Point Retail Center, which you may recall is that new little strip center area in between on the chicken rows there, in between KFC and the other chicken location. Council is very pleased that this company came with the master sign plan request, because it allows staff and council and P&Z not to have to deal with it in the future. Well, staff has to deal with it, but it doesn't have to come back to P&Z and council. So exactly what planning and zoning moved forward was exactly what city council did. So those are the 3 items that you forwarded.
Any comments or questions for Alex? We envision this as a regular feature going forward, though we may want to consider if there are routine matters that didn't generate any discussion at council level, that we may not want to present them here. We could just assume things went through clearly.
Yeah, I think that would be something maybe you could work with the city administrator or city secretary to put the agenda together and say, hey, these are items we'd like to hear back from.
Sure.
Or you can say, because they have to be in the agenda.
Right.
So because otherwise you can't publish the public meeting.
But we think we would probably want to depend as well on your input. If something happens at council that would be beneficial for this group to know about.
Okay.
You could also.
And some of that's the timing on the agenda requirement and council meeting time
Understood.
too. So, thank you.
Great, thanks, Alex. Next item is approval of the minutes from the regular meeting on September 4th, 2018. You should have found those in your packet of materials. So it's time to call to our attention changes or edits. Otherwise, if not, we can have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Is there a second? Mike on a second. Motion and second. All in favor of approving the minutes for the September 4 meeting as submitted, please signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion, minutes are approved. Okay, super. Item 6 tonight, here you go, sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're gonna need it.
Okay. Item 6 tonight is discussion and action on a request by Alamo Sign Solutions for the approval of a wall signage pursuant to Municipal Code of Ordinances, Chapter 66 signs, Section 51, commercial signs projecting wall and hanging in or on windows for Take 5 oil change at 12266 Bandera Road. And I will turn it to the city administrator, and sir, you're, I gather, representing as well? Yes. Okay, so if we have questions, just stand by. I'll ask Rick, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Staff did review this item, and as was included within your packets, we determined that the sign was compliant with the Code of Ordinances for 99.99% of them. The one component really that was not troublesome, but that we looked at was the number. If you look at the sign, there's the drive-through oil change component, and then there's the logo component. If they had been placed side by side, we would have easily considered them all one part of the wall sign. Because they're separated, we at least wanted to bring it to the attention of the P&Z and City Council that it does appear to depict two wall signs. Staff is considering this one sign just because they sort of work together. Of course, that's staff's opinion. The commission and council may disagree. The number that is allowed is two signs. However, the stipulation is that one sign has to be per street or pedestrian way. You will see a sign in the upper left-hand corner that is mandated by the state of Texas for the inspections, and so we do not consider that a part of this application. We just consider that to be allowed since it is required by the state of Texas for state inspections.
Rick, what is the street that this fronts?
This is along Bandera Road behind Hill Country Crossing 1, so it is behind an existing shopping center.
Can one consider the long drive that it is situated on as a street, as a second street in addition to Bandera Road? Or is that more properly a private drive?
Well, we've considered in the past a private drive to be either a street or a pedestrian way. So that is something that we've looked at in the past. If you recall, we did that for Great Harvest Bread Company, where it has a drive aisle on the side, and then it fronts Bandera.
Right. But the stipulation is one per side, one per street.
That is correct.
And the placement, sorry, I'll stop in a second, just so I'm clear, where will that Take 5 appear? Is this an accurate representation?
Yes, sir. So the Take 5 oil change would be the oil can that's on the front of the facade to the right.
With that backing color, that sort of
Yes.
off pale red, whatever that is, okay. Okay. Other questions, and we have the applicant here too, who can answer questions, so I'd open it up to others.
Mr. Chair,
Yep, Mario.
this is being proposed, this is not something that's already mounted on the building, correct?
It's been an existing auto repair facility, so there is or was signage. I don't know if it's still there.
Yeah, I mean,
Look at
there's
the bottom,
existing signage on that building, and so they're trying to update it. I assume maybe it's a change in ownership or a change in franchise, I don't know.
Come on up, and so we can put you on the record. Just give us your name and business address.
I knew it was something.
James Alfaro with Alamo Sign Solutions, 218 Saltillo Street, San Antonio, Texas.
Go ahead.
So, it is an existing express lube is what it is, but they've been bought out by this company called Take 5. So that's the reason for the name change. And the update, they're basically removing all of the existing signage for express lube, repainting the building, and then applying the new cabinets and letters on the drive-throughs you see on the front part of the building. It was advised to us by the city that we were only allowed to have two signs. There was another sign proposed for the rear elevation, but we were told we were only going to be granted two. So we revised our plans to Ernest, and I believe, did they send them to you as well?
Yes, and they have
Okay,
all
so-
that was submitted.
We just have, that's what we have right there.
That's the front. The rear, the initial proposal was to have something similar to the letters that you see there on the back, but that's been scrubbed on the advice of the staff department so that it could get approved, or that's the hope, anyway.
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
yes, go ahead.
For the gentleman. Sir, is this the standard, is this a franchise? Are they separate all the time, these signs, or are they usually together?
They're usually separated like that. It's not a franchise, it's actually a corporate company. They've actually opened up businesses all around the country.
Are there others in San Antonio?
There are actually a total of 28 locations that we're doing. This is one of them.
And they all have the same look and feel?
Yes, sir, exactly.
With
They're
the
all
same color scheme and the same
Same color
separation of the
scheme.
signs?
Yes, sir. Everything is exactly the same at each store location.
But the name of the company is Take 5. It's not Take 5 Drive-Through Oil Change, correct? The drive-through oil change is just a direction for the customer?
It's just the concept. It's take 5, you stay in your car, it takes 5 minutes to go. It's kind of a NASCAR concept. If you flip back to the front, there's some checker panels on the front to show like a raceway. See the checker panels on front of the building before you enter the bays? It's like an express loop, but it's more it's NASCAR themed. You stay in your car, they get your oil change, and you get in and out of there in 5 minutes. So,
Has your company modified for different communities they might be in that you're aware of?
we did also in Bulverde, and I think we also did another one in Universal City where we had to make some modifications. But for the most part, most of the other municipalities have allowed the signage to go up as it looks. We had a modification on the drive-through oil change. We had / and then some other letters that were added at another site, but they were okay with removing that other part. So it wasn't that big of a situation for the company itself. But as it represents right here this is what they offer. It's a drive-through oil change. The name of the company is Take 5, but the concept is a drive-through oil change.
But, question, does that mean that, is it a directional sign telling the customer to drive? Is that how you enter the facility, or do you drive around through the
You
back?
drive around the rear and you enter in from the rear of the building and then you exit out the front.
Okay.
So that's not an instruction to drive in right there?
No, it's not a directional sign or anything. Actually, if you look at one of the other slides, there is a directional sign in the front. It's a monument sign. Did you get that? Yeah, there's an existing monument sign out there.
Talking about the existing
on
one
the
for the
street.
shopping center.
The shopping center?
Yes, right. This one.
That would not be a part of the packet because that's a part of the master sign plan, so that's approved already.
Okay. Other than that, that's the only signage that we're proposing.
Do you have any locations that do not have the words drive-through oil change on any of the buildings?
No, sir. No.
Let me turn it over here to Ron, go ahead.
Sir, would you guys be, the red stripe, we have a thing, we try to keep it a hill country look. We've done things, like our AutoZone only has the stripe on the front. Would you guys be willing to unred stripe the rest?
Well, I can't speak to the corporation per se. I can go back and let them know that this is what you're requesting, but, the overall concept of the business, the colors of the business incorporate the tan, the red, and the yellow striping.
Yeah.
Would it be within our purview, Rick, even to address the design on the other facing sides of the building? Because it's really not part of the signage, which is what we have on our agenda.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a part of their logo or color scheme, so I think it is appropriate for y'all to address it.
We addressed it for AutoZone all the way around.
I don't recall if that was part of signage or if it was more the
That
design.
was more of the conceptual design
Okay,
review.
Right. I didn't see these color, unless I'm missing it. Are these the letter coloring and the red? Is that actually defined as red and yellow? I don't see it anywhere here. And how it's defined.
It doesn't, well, it says it on the monument sign, which you're not listing here, but it does say, red, yellow, black, and white are the colors.
Okay,
The building itself, though, is a tan color building. Similar to the color of the existing building that is there now.
I don't think the concern is the tan color. I think it's the red.
Right, that's what we're addressing. You know, I can't really say, hey, you guys, I can go and let them know that that's something you have a concern with. Although I do know that there's, the car wash, wash tub that's got a whole lot of red out there in their business storefront, so, I don't know what your thoughts were on that one when they came through. But, I would ask to give the same consideration as the wash tub to these people as well, since there's a lot of red in their color at the car wash. These guys have a lot less red, it's just a stripe around the building, whereas wash tub's pretty dominant red all the way around.
Just for clarification though, the wash tub, and I don't mean to get in y'all's business here, but the wash tub is completely surrounded in masonry. So it's not red like the rest of the wash tubs throughout the city of San Antonio.
Okay,
other
I was
comments?
just making a comparison.
Michael?
Mr. Chairman, I think, echo Commissioner Hoza, that we're looking for more of a hill country theme across, you know, the entire building. And the stripe concept, I think, while it may be the standard logo and all that, I think it's kind of a clash of the hill country theme that we're looking for. The oil can and all that, that's cool, that, you know, that distinguishes you. I think something, maybe do something with that color scheme.
Okay. Are you talking about the side and the rear elevations, or just the side? Since it is behind an existing building, it's not like it's right on the
Right.
frontage part of Bandera. It is set back and behind another building, so it's somewhat hidden, so to speak. It's not right here, right off of Bandera.
Jason?
Yeah, I think, you know, the struggle here is always to, you know, allow folks with a logo to try to exercise as much logo as they can, but while trying to maintain the, you know, the zoning ordinances that we have regarding finishes and colors and kind of a hill country look, which is sort of written at large through our code.
Okay?
And so, you know, there's two sort of issues here. One is that, you know, there's a lot of red, which is kind of not really what we're looking for. And there's two, you know, there's sort of a struggle as to whether or not this is one or two signs. And to me, visually, you know, I can understand they're maybe not necessarily need to be connected to be considered a sign, but there's clearly like a big break between these two things. You've got one thing saying drive-through oil change, a break in the facade, and then another object. You know, and I'm wondering if there's a way to maybe tone down the red a little bit, maybe bring these things a little bit closer together, and so they kind of read as more of one sign, and reducing the red, you know, to, you know, maybe a little bit less than it is presently, and then try and tone it down a little more to the hill country colors that are, you know, pretty predominant throughout the rest of the building. And we don't want to stipulate exactly how you do that. That, you know, that's between y'all and corporate. But that would kind of be what my personal recommendation.
I think one thing we need to consider here, and I generally agree with the sentiment that's being expressed, but I also want us to be cognizant of the fact of where this business is, set back. And I have I guess, a different perspective on that oil can. I think that visual could be helpful in recognition from Bandera Road, because that is I didn't see how far it is, but you all have been back there probably, it's a good bit. I do agree, though, that a more muted red would be appreciated. We have worked with Washtub to change how they were going to do it. The same thing with the Kentucky Fried Chicken, same thing with the AutoZone. We understand that each one of these businesses are part of a corporate system that has a preferred way of doing it, and we want to try to allow as much flexibility for them to do what they wish, yet, as Jason said, we do want to maintain a certain look and feel.
This is, Chairman, the view essentially from
Where are we?
Bander Road. We're right,
Okay, so it's right down that road there, right?
yeah, it's right down that road.
It's behind that building
Behind
on
that
the left.
building, more or less.
Right.
And just to be clear, I think that the Take 5 part of it, I mean, that's, and I think that's, you know, as someone who does own a portion of a small business and thinks about these things, you know, that was where I want it, because that's right, that's your most visible part of your building as people are approaching the driveway, and I don't think you should scale that down or move it, but I think the issue is more the big red stripe and the drive-through oil change kind of, you know, taking out the rest of the building, and, you know, while that is not terribly visible from the public way, quote unquote, you know, it is, you know, I think more than we've allowed previously with similar projects, and, you know, is also seen by other people that drive down that road to other businesses that are located on this property, and, you know, I just think it maybe is just a little bit too much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
On your presentation here, is the drive-through oil change, is that to scale, do you think?
For the most part, yes, sir. I mean, as best as we can see it. As far as the width, how it would go through from the middle of one bay to the next? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, no, the height, because I'm looking here, it says it's 18 inches on your drawing. And I'm just
Yes.
wondering if that is to scale.
Yes, that red stripe is actually, if I'm not mistaken, is 36 inches.
Okay,
And so that sign is centered right into that red stripe.
all right.
Other comments or questions for the applicant before we try to put a motion out there? Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So the two issues here that would need, if the commission wishes to articulate them in a motion, one would be, well, actually, I don't think if we considered it as one sign, if that's the sentiment, we don't need to articulate that. So that would be fine, unless there's an objection to having them, considering them as one, meaning the words plus the can. The second issue is if the commission wishes to say something or stipulate something regarding the striping in terms of color, in terms of shade of color, or amount of striping, that could be articulated as well. And keep in mind that whatever motion we propose is a recommendation over to council to look at. Rick?
I would just add one other potential motion, and that would be to table the item until the subsequent meeting and allow the applicant to come back.
I was gonna ask about that.
Well, do we know what is the status of the business? I mean, we don't want to hold them up with,
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying, keep in mind that is a third option
Right.
now that we have gone through the process of council finally approving all of this. One of the discussions we had about was whether the commission could table the item, allow the applicant to make revisions, and then send it to council as an approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Does that make sense?
no.
I think there was some discussion, correct me if I'm wrong, about this, that the city council most likely would like to see something that the commission has approved.
Right.
And has worked with the applicant on formulating so that you feel comfortable with it. And so I think that that is probably an easier process for council, but also for the applicant, because they know that they're going into council with an approval, or a recommendation.
What are you suggesting that this body would approve? How would we approve something we haven't seen?
That's precisely why you would table the item until the next meeting.
Oh, so it
I
would
thought
come
you-
back to us?
So it comes
then?
back to you, yes.
Okay,
But
that's where
that's,
you
but
lost
that's,
us.
to your point, that's assuming whether the applicant has the time. I don't know that.
But that would mean tabling it, bringing it back to us, and then subsequently going back to council, right?
Yes. But council also meets predominantly a week after you all do,
Right.
so. sometimes a day after, or
So
two.
I think we've done that with people in the past. We table it, we let them go off. They've heard our feedback directly. They kind of get the idea of what we're looking for. More importantly, they know what we aren't looking for. And if we were to approve something tonight, then there's a challenge of how do you articulate that in the minutes so that the thoughts
Right.
are adequately or properly communicated other than the video.
Because council wouldn't see it. There would be nothing for council to see.
Right. And that too, right.
would be
There's words on
postponed.
paper without pictures that we're visualizing and they don't have.
But there's the extra step that's now in the process, just how it is that it would come back to us and then still subsequently go on the next week or 10 days.
Yes, it would still need to go to council.
What's your sense on the timeline for them?
We're already behind schedule with the store opening. Right now, they're losing money every time the day passes. So it's not really something that I think would be beneficial to them. I mean, the doors can't open until the name change is completed. And if we're halting this and then have to come back again, it's another week to 2 weeks to
So
have to-
theoretically, for council, hypothetically, if this body were to make a recommendation about some sort of change in the striping or color, whatever it is, would council wish to see a rendering before council made final approval?
That would be something that I would work with the applicant on trying to get something so that we can have at least what the commission would like to see before council, in addition to what the applicant has originally
See, in the
proposed.
past, that would have come back here and it would have been final approved here, but we need
That's
to make
correct.
sure that whoever's, that when council approves or considers the item, they actually have in front of them
We're on the same page literally.
what it is.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, are you, I guess I'd go back to Mr. Wickman.
Whitman.
If you go back to the slide that shows the elevation of the rear and the side. Okay, so if we go back to our customer and say, council's recommending, basically the existing conditions is what would be approved versus what's proposed.
Or beige.
Or, yeah, well, yeah, just strictly
Well, I
one
mean,
color.
It appears that you're painting it, there's like a beige color. It looks like you're painting it all the way down the from the parapet cap to the wainscot. It appears to be all new color, as I see on the proposed slides. Looks like the parapet's being repainted red, there's a white stripe, a red stripe, a white stripe, and then a big swath of tan.
Yes.
I think, the tan, I think we can all agree is certainly within bounds of what our ordinances look for. I don't think the white is necessarily such a big deal either. I just think it's a lot of red. and-
Okay, so just so I'm clear, I can go back to
Oh,
my
we
customer.
have to have a motion here, so right now this is still hypothetical, so hang on just a minute. and
Okay.
I think we'll give you some clear direction in terms
Okay.
of what we pass, or what we recommend. But the point would be, whatever comes out of this, would be for you to go back to your client
Yes, sir.
and explain to them, here's what the commission has approved and why.
Yes, sir.
And then to work with staff to try to get a rendering to council, which is it next week?
Yes, sir.
I mean, I don't know if that's a reasonable turnaround, 7 days, basically, thereabouts, so that the council can actually see what this body has recommended, so.
Well, I'm assuming that what they render and give to the council is what we would have said, yeah, that.
Right, I mean, the one thing that's
But that's
missing,
missing.
Rick becomes the key person in this, because he's heard this discussion and
Well, and then the
and
council.
Alex, I'm sorry, and Alex. So they know whatever comes out of this, they'll know what the sentiment of this body is, and I think can reflect that if there's any lack of clarity in the minutes or in the recommendation itself. That make sense?
Can I make one comment?
Yes.
With regard to the sides of the building and the rear, my initial impression is it's a waste of money to paint the sides and the rear because nobody, physically, literally nobody is going to see that. So, just from looking at a dollar's perspective, I don't see how the applicant, the owner of this business, would really care about the sides and the rear because literally nobody can see it.
And that's good that you bring that up, because other than your ordinance, is the council concerned about what the city will see? The people in the city will see these colors? Because like you just said, it's really
Well, the
not
problem, the
visible.
problem becomes exactly what you said before. Well, hey, he did it, why can't I do
Yeah,
it?
so-
And the next guy may be on a prominent corner as
So,
opposed to,
so basically what I'm assuming you're proposing is that we request our customer to have just a solid beige exterior.
Well, again, we got to get a motion up here, but
Okay.
the sense is, if you look at that picture, say the top right picture, the sense thus far is only about the red. The striping, the white striping doesn't seem to be giving concern to anybody. Though if, for example, we said, we would request that all be made tan with the white striping, I think the client could easily say, well, let's get rid of the white striping too and make it all tan. I think same result.
I can't say specifically if that's what they would do, but I would probably guess that based off of your
Yeah.
somewhat recommendation that they need to open the store, so if you guys want it painted tan,
Right.
then
So let's,
it's gonna get painted tan.
I think we've had a good discussion here. Why don't we go ahead and get a motion out there, and we'll have to discuss the motion, and that should give hopefully clear direction. So why don't I open it up or request that we get a motion here? Jason?
I would make a motion to approve if the red stripe on the front facade is reduced in length, to make it more of a sign and less of an overall building stripe, and that the red stripes on the other facades were omitted entirely in favor of more neutral Hill Country colors.
Say that one more time.
The red stripe on the front facade were reduced in length to make it more of a sign instead of a stripe across the whole building, and that the red stripes on the remaining facades were omitted in favor of more zoning-friendly Hill Country colors.
So to be clear, you're not speaking to the shade of the red, but you're, in your motion, including that the length of the red be shortened. Understand that? Okay.
Yes.
Is there a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, so let's talk about the motion.
Can I ask one
Yeah,
quick
go ahead.
question to clarify? So I hear what you said on, about the front. Well, never mind, I remember now. You eliminate the red all the way around except for the front.
Right.
Okay. Would you entertain maybe reducing the height and width by a percentage?
Of the red?
Right, because you haven't said how much you want it. And I wouldn't want to say a number of feet because we don't know. I'd just say something like a percentage of whatever it was proposed. And we can talk about a number. I didn't, 50 might be too much.
What are they,
The lettering is 290.
Because the size of the lettering on the front doesn't have to be huge because you're not going to see it from Bandera Road anyway.
The length of the wording is between 24 and 25 feet.
Okay.
what is the total maximum allowable sign area they're allowed on that facade?
6,
No, it was in the 50s, I think. 60s or 50s.
they're allowed 64 because the linear footage of the building is 64 feet. They're in compliance with the drive-through oil change and the logo.
Right.
They're under the requirement.
Yeah, right, and so I recognize that. I was just, as far as the helping, I guess the word would be tame the appearance a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be amenable to a percentage, spitball 25% reduced from what it is presently.
That work?
I'm gonna kind of push back on that a little bit. I mean, if you're wanting to do away with the side and rear elevation is painted red, and then you want to take away even more red in the front, I mean, we all agree that this place of business is behind a big building. not that many people are gonna see it. So if we eliminate the side and the rear, I think
So-
that's,
Let's do this. Since we have a motion up, let me ask you to hold off for right now. I know he has to, but we gotta figure this out here now. So we've got this motion up, so do you wanna speak to the motion? Beyond what's already been said?
If you're not in favor, I'm okay with that. I'm just trying to think of
Yeah,
ways
yeah.
to kind of,
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's kind of, we've talked about this before, where it, you know, the red stripe, because it doesn't comport with our zoning, you know, it essentially becomes a sign. And, you know, that is in far in excess of what, you know, the size. I mean, obviously, he's less, the sign as it, you know, the actual object is less than what's allowed, but, you know, it becomes like a logo, you know, and so, you know, that to me is also problematic. I mean, the other thing, I mean, we could talk about, you know, what if it was different, a more muted color? I think that would, you know, like a you know, Adobe brick red or something like that, that would be more in comporting with our zoning ordinance, but I don't know, you know, I don't know that helps them either, because that kind of tones down the corporate logo.
Do you wanna speak to it, Mike?
I agree with
My,
it.
to my,
I'm
to my
okay.
thinking, just one more point, I mean, again, I don't want to direct them to say exactly to do this, but it would seem to me like, for example, you could pull that red stripe towards the take 5 on that last, what, past that third bay, and have that part of the facade just be all tan, and you're not really losing anything, because that corner, nobody ever sees anyway. I mean, it's completely invisible from anybody but the, you know, the rearmost occupants of the commercial building in front of them.
Other discussion on the motion? Richard?
I'm not sure. So the motion is just make it smaller
The motion is to remove the red striping on
on
the other sides.
Right, I got that.
And to shrink the red striping
But we didn't say how much shrink.
25%.
Oh, 25%.
On the
Okay,
front.
that answers
Not,
my
not,
question.
yes, by 25%. Mario, any?
My only thought is, I mean, I appreciate the good motion here, but my thought is reducing it by 25% doesn't really mean anything. I mean, it's still gonna be the same to me. I mean, we leave it at the way it is, or 25% isn't. I know we're painting the other sides and we're getting the red gone from there, but I'm having a challenge understanding that part of it. I think it's either reduce it significantly or remove the red completely, or the possibility of toning it down. I think that's where my mindset's at. I see two separate logos here, and I do see a prominent red that's not Hill Country friendly. That's a negative in my mindset. And I do appreciate the commission's direction of being mindful towards the fact that if we make adjustments, then it's gonna come back and follow us down the road. And I think we need to continue the good work we've been doing where we're trying to make sure that we stick to our thoughts, where we're trying to make sure that everything is Helota's character that we're looking for. So that's where my mind is right now. I don't know if a 25% reduction is gonna take us there.
Ron? There you go. So no?
No.
I would, this is a reasonable motion. I actually personally don't support it, because I do think that, I think it's reasonable for them to have that full front of the building striping in terms of the distance allowed. I would prefer, speaking personally, I would prefer to ask them to have a more muted red. You called it brick red, different ways you could describe it. But I think that we're making a request that they remove the striping from 3 sides of the building aesthetically, and to fit with what the design that we typically like to see around here. And to mute the red rather than shrinking it, I think is, in my opinion, a preferred way to go. So I would just say that. So we can call the vote on this, see how it comes out, and then go from there. All right, so the motion is,
Okay, the motion is to remove the red stripe from sides and rear. And to, what was the rest of your?
It's to reduce by 25% the
Okay.
red stripe on the front.
Is that, may I ask, is that the length or is that the overall area?
To reduce the, I understood it to be the length,
Yeah, so the length.
the length. The rest of the motion is to recommend approval on all other aspects as submitted by the applicant for Take 5 Oil at 12266, 12266 Bandera Road. Okay, so all in favor of this motion, please signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Who opposed? Okay, so the motion passes 3-2 on this motion to reduce it, leaving it the same color. This is a recommendation that goes to city council next. And so council will consider this in terms of making their overall assessment. It certainly would be worthwhile for you to be there to speak to them, respond to their questions as well. Okay, thank you for being here. Appreciate your input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of the agenda. So do we have a motion to adjourn? Ron?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a motion to adjourn?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, signal aye.
Aye.
Opposed, we stand adjourned at 7:42.